All right, welcome everyone. On behalf of the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, I want to thank you for joining us today for the Circuit Trails Coalition Community Grant Program Informational Webinar. My name is Amelia Crotty, and I work on trails and outdoor recreation here in the Philadelphia office of the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, which is also called PEC or PEC. PEC is a statewide environmental organization founded in 1970, focused on conservation through collaboration. I'll be leading today's webinar with support from my colleague, Daniel Pascal of the East Coast Greenway Alliance, who you can see on the screen right now. Thank you to Daniel for providing links in the chat and for monitoring the Q&A during today's webinar. And I'm going to go ahead and spotlight my video. So you're not watching Daniel the whole time. Okay, that should work. Okay, some housekeeping before we get started. So here on a Zoom webinar, participants' videos and microphones are off. Just FYI, so you're aware. Sometimes I get nervous that I can be heard on a webinar. The chat box should be visible to everyone. Daniel will use it to drop links throughout the session. Those links are also included in the final 2 slides of this presentation, which you will receive after the webinar in PDF format, so you'll be able to click on them. The session is being recorded right now, and the recording and slides will be available online after the session and will be sent to you via email as well. Please use the Q&A box during the session to ask any questions. We'll either address it, Daniel will either address it right there in the box, which will make the question appear to everyone, or we'll hold off and leave it to the last like 10-15 minutes of the session so that we can answer your questions. Okay, so here's our agenda for the next roughly hour or so. So I'm going to start by explaining what the Circuit Trails are and who the Circuit Trails Coalition is. I'm going to spend the bulk of the session going through the Equity of Access to Trails report. And if you don't know what that is, if you've never heard of it, terrific. You're going to learn all about it. I'm going to go through the grant guidelines, of course, the application process, important dates, and finally the resources that I mentioned. And then we'll leave time for questions at the end. Okay, so to get us started, so the Circuit Trails, the focus of the community grant program, is one of America's largest trail networks. It's right here in our backyard. It's a vast regional network of multi-use trails and paths spanning 9 counties in the greater Philadelphia area throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So if you'll take a moment right now and find the chat, please drop into the chat box where you are on this map, where you're logging on from. Maybe you're in Trenton, New Jersey, or maybe you're in Chester, PA, or you're in Phoenixville or Collingswood. Let us know where you're coming from, and I'm going to give us like 20 seconds for people to do that. And then Daniel's going to share where folks are coming from. I'm here in Philadelphia. Can everyone see the chat box? Uh-oh, we have a raised hand. Perhaps you cannot see the chat box. Oops, excuse me. Maybe we'll skip this.
I think the chat's disabled.
Oh,
all right.
Okay, sorry about that. But you can still use the Q&A to ask questions. Now, do you not see a chat box at all? Is the question. If that
chat box has been disconnected.
Okay. So I apologize for this snafu. You will not be receiving links in the chat box unless you can send them in the Q&A. I'm sorry about that, everyone. Chat is disabled. Thank you, everyone, for putting in to the Q&A that the chat is disabled. So we're going to send you all the links afterwards. My apologies for them not being available during the webinar. I should also start up front by saying this is our first time running this grant program, and we appreciate your grace and patience with us. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving along. Apologies for that. And if Daniel, if you want to try to figure out if there's a way through the Q&A box to send out any links, that could be an alternative.
All right, yeah.
Although Alex can see, thank you, Alex, for saying that you can see our chats. Okay.
People are putting in their location in the Q&A. So we have some folks from Philly, Stony Creek Park, got one from Chester. Hey, Baron. Got a number of others chiming in now. Ari, yeah,
Beautiful.
Delco, Radnor, Westchester, Camden, Kennett Square
Perfect.
only. Oh my gosh.
Love it. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for working with us on this. I'm glad that worked out. And I think you will be able to see the links in the chat. Okay. Look at that. Working things out together already. I love this group. Okay. So currently the Circuit Trails network, getting back to the network, is around 350 miles of built trails. The vision is for a network to grow to what we have planned for 800 miles of trails here in the greater Philadelphia region. So one of the things that Daniel will drop into the chat now is a link to learn more about the circuit, if this is your first time hearing about it. And then a second link that is going to be a very detailed map of the entire network, where you can actually click on each trail, find out if it's planned, if it's built. That is from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, which is also called DVRPC, which you might hear me say as well. All right. I included a few images here just to bring that map to life. It's such a terrific resource we have right here in our backyard. So I wanted to just show some of that. These photographs were taken by Tom Carroll and provided by the Rails to Trails Conservancy, which is another organization in the Circuit Trails Coalition. And these images also just show them the diversity of the trails within the network. Okay, so the Circuit Trails Coalition came together in 2012 to advocate for the development of this robust connected trail network called the Circuit. So bringing together these disparate trails into something that was branded as the Circuit. In the past 5 or so years, the coalition has expanded its focus from advocating for like funding and planning and building of trails to ensuring equitable access and use of those trails. The coalition's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or JEDI task force, came together and has been leading this effort. Some of the tangible results of those efforts have been the Inclusive Trail Planning Toolkit, and then this Equity of Access to Trails study and report that I'm going to talk about. Before I move on to the Equity of Access to Trails, I just want to be clear on who's who, because I know it's throwing a lot at you, even though we're only 10 minutes in. Pennsylvania Environmental Council, or PEC, is a member of the Circuit Trails Coalition and administers the community grant program on behalf of the coalition. So when you go onto the website, you'll see the PEC logo, you'll see the Circuit Trails logo as well. PEC is supported by an advisory group of coalition members. I want to say a deep thank you to the members from Clean Air Council, East Coast Greenway Alliance, Lawrence Hopewell Trail, Rails to Trails Conservancy, and Tri-State Transportation Campaign. Each staff person who's participating puts in a ton of time and effort into this work. So thank you to them. Okay. So I'm going to spend a good chunk of time on Equity of Access to Trails. It's a study that the Circuit Trails Coalition JEDI Task Force commissioned in fall 2020, and it was funded by the William Penn Foundation, which also funds this grant program. As I mentioned earlier, this was part of the coalition's effort to more intentionally center justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion into the coalition's work. The study resulted in a report that serves really as a roadmap for the Circuit Trails Coalition. It makes really clear what needs to be done to make the trails more inclusive and accessible, and to ensure that the trail users reflect the makeup of our region. The community grant program is an effort to fund individuals, groups, and organizations to bring the report recommendations to life. So I'm going to take some time to go through the study and report recommendations so it's clear to you that how central they are to this grant program. Daniel's going to post a bunch of links right now. Now, one is a link to the full report. It is 400+ pages long. We do not expect you to read all 400 pages. Just a heads up, if you go towards page 270, I think it is, you can read actually transcripts from focus groups that are really fascinating. He's also going to post a 52-page summary, but also if that's too much, what is it, TLDR? 8-page handout and 2-page handouts are also available. So do what you can, but you'll see those links. And these are also available in other on the slides and on the guideline pages online. So to start, the study addressed 4 overarching questions. They're shown here, and it focused on 4 circuit trail communities. So ultimately, what we wanted to know was about the needs, interests, and apprehensions of people living near trails in underserved neighborhoods. We wanted to know who is using trails in these focus neighborhoods. And then really, what can we do to engage, motivate, and welcome residents onto trails? And then how can we generalize what we learn so that we can reach even more potential trail users outside the focus communities? The study focused on 4 communities, as I said: Camden, New Jersey, Cobbs Creek in Philadelphia, Norristown, PA, and Trenton, New Jersey. Each of these communities has a circuit trail running through an underserved neighborhood, and it also has community stakeholders interested in using the trail to advance community objectives. They have a few other criteria that made them appropriate for the study as well. And what I'm going to say now is that the study was deep, the report is long. I'm going to really do a very cursory kind of glance at it. Just I want to make sure that's very clear. I'm not going to be explaining everything because it's just too much to cover right now. The study included stakeholder meetings that convened community organizations. There were intercept surveys conducted by community members who were paid to survey local trail users. A community survey was mailed to residents living within 10 blocks of the trails. They could fill them out online or on paper. And then finally, a series of focus groups with community members of color were conducted by OpinionWorks, which is the firm that ran the study. Again, I'm skipping over a lot, but I'm going to go straight to the study results because I think this is what's relevant for our conversation. So the data showed 3 primary barriers keeping people from finding respite on local trails. The first one was anxiety over COVID-19. And just a reminder that this study was conducted in fall 2020, which is relatively early in the pandemic, so this makes a lot of sense. Almost half of respondents said that they spend less time outside during the pandemic than before. And we don't have any more current data to find out if this anxiety has subsided with COVID restrictions being limited, or if people are spending more time or the same limited amount of time. So we just don't know that right now. The second barrier is public safety concerns. So on one hand, people were afraid of getting caught in street violence. On the other hand, increased police or security presence at trails made residents feel anxious. And then the third barrier the study uncovered was just unwelcoming public spaces. That on some trails, people felt, I knew my dog would do that. On some trails, people felt that the physical space was unmaintained and then thus uninviting. In other areas that were well maintained, people of color felt that they received looks and microaggressions from other trail users that made them feel like they were not supposed to be there. I should say not everyone felt this way. Some study participants who were more involved in community happenings did feel that they were more welcome in those public spaces. So these were the 3 primary barriers that the study revealed. The big thing though, a main finding of the study is that people really want to get outdoors no matter where they come from. Respondents used words like rejuvenating, soothing, and peaceful when talking about nature. But fewer than 2/3 of residents were aware that there is a trail close to where they live. That percentage did drop when a specific trail name was mentioned. So that shows that marketing efforts do work, but that we need to push further into communities in a more useful way. Another finding is that people feel similarly about the presence of water, that it's said to lead to peacefulness, but more needs to be done to bring residents to the water and to break down barriers to that access. The study found that most residents come to trails for passive recreation. So walking and relaxing were significantly more popular than biking or running. When asked about amenities they would like to see on the trail, respondents answered with very place-based amenities like food trucks and music festivals and simple places to sit and enjoy nature. And just having a place to be seems like the priority for most community members. So we asked participants to imagine a trail that would attract them. Like what amenities, programs, and environment would it have? And so the answers fell into 5 categories: security, greening, physical infrastructure, programming, and outreach. And here's where we start to get into what it is we at the Coalition are hoping to fund through the community grant program. And this is just why I'm spending so much time on this study. So I'm going to get into each one of these because this is, again, where we hope these funds go to produce some projects and programs that get at these these recommendations essentially. Hopefully the descriptions I offer either sound like the project you have in mind or they inspire you to develop something like it. So we're going to be on the slide for maybe a couple minutes. Okay, so security. So people want to feel safe on the trail, but with a few exceptions, people insisted that they did not want to see a police presence on the trail. Most people would welcome ambassadors or like park rangers, like the trail ranger that you see in the upper left-hand corner from the Washington Area Bicycle Association. They want to feel like a more friendly approach, or even adding something like call boxes along the trail where areas where safety might be a concern. Greening. So residents want trails that will provide them with respite from the urban environment. They want a creatively designed trail that offers glimpses of water, urban greening, sounds of birds, splashes of color, places where they can like dip out of their normal world and dip into a more peaceful environment. And along those lines, many people asked for amenities that would allow them to gather with family or friends, entertain their children, or just sit and like read a book and enjoy nature. These could include places to picnic or barbecue, playgrounds, benches, other places to sit. They don't need to be expensive. And I think this example from Summit Lake in Akron, Ohio is a good example. So there's picnic tables, some of those like sturdy umbrellas and like twinkly lights can really make a place feel welcoming and cozy and a nice place to just sit and spend time. So people hoped for better maintenance of trail surfaces, better lighting in certain areas, easier and safer access points, including parking. In addition, they hoped for amenities along the trail like bike share, restrooms, like sports fields and boat rentals. I recognize that all of that sounds very expensive, but this funding could cover potentially like developing public support for amenities like that, or working with decision makers to develop a plan to fund and implement something like that. I want to be clear that the funds don't need to be spent on something that's like hard. It could, and sort of like tables and chairs. It could be on, organizing residents and to building public support. Okay, so signage. Study participants asked for signs in their neighborhoods to point the direction to the trail. It was also suggested that signage could tie into the Circuit Trails network and pinpoint where people could get on the network just to explore their area. So this one is titled An Invitation to Have Fun. So the best way to overcome this like subtle lack of welcome in public spaces that people felt was to offer compelling and irresistible activities and events, and actually invite people into those public spaces wholeheartedly to make spaces vibrant and gear them towards the taste of the audience. People will come to that, the respondents said. So they suggested live music, festivals, crafts, other family-oriented activities, pop-up shops, local artisans, vendors, historical and cultural commemoration along trails, and food trucks. There were plenty of ideas, and I'm sure you all have many more, and we can't wait to read your applications. So imagery can be really meaningful. Stakeholders suggested that public art at a trail access point feature people of color, and posting messages like Black Lives Matter in key locations would also convey a sense of respect and welcome, like this center image from the Atlanta Beltline. Many people wanted to be on the trail with a friend or in a group, both for fellowship and to just alleviate those safety concerns that I mentioned. They welcome opportunities to join up with other people along the trail to pursue similar interests with activities like guided nature hikes or bird watching, yoga along the trail, exercise groups, and activities for kids. People also want to see images of people who look like them enjoying the trail. They want to imagine themselves on the trail and know that they belong. The lower right-hand corner is an example of the circuit's website with outreach and that feature people who are actually like from the neighborhoods where the trail is, having fun on the trail. And then lastly, a number of study participants mentioned local social media influencers or bloggers who focus not on like nature or trails, but they focus maybe on music or public safety or food, other topics, and like getting those influencers out onto the trail and curating images that local followers would see, and that would leave an impression on them. Other focus group participants talked about more traditional outreach methods like going door to door with flyers, having conversations, doing that sort of time-consuming and we know expensive work of actually having one-on-one conversations with people in like very traditional sort of outreach style. So those are the categories of sort of recommendations that the report made. This is a list of those. These are all the actions that we can take to make underrepresented trail users feel more welcome on the trails. And those, as I've said, these are the actions that we hope to fund through this program. So Daniel will post a link to a document that we're calling the Community Grant Program Purpose and Objectives. And that has this list that I just read off. So if that was just a lot of listening and maybe it went over your head and it was just too much, then it's all written out on that document. So you'll be able to like take more time to dig into it as you're thinking about the project that you want to put into your application. So you will receive that. Okay, so that said, if you know your community's needs regarding access to nature and potential use of local trails, if this list doesn't reflect it, that's totally okay. We want to hear from you and learn about your project. So please don't think that this is the absolute list that it has to be, you know, it has to be reflected on here. We're interested in hearing what else you have in mind because you know your neighborhood better than we do. Okay, so I'm going to shift into the program guidelines, but I'm going to pause first. I see a number of messages in the chat, and I just want to make sure that we're all good.
I think we had some feedback about some of the chat being disabled and
okay,
hands being raised and controlling the hands.
Okay.
But I think we're good. But please, yeah, keep using the Q&A to ask any questions, and I'll keep sharing links.
Excellent. Thanks, Daniel. Okay, so with that, now we're getting into the meat of like the actual program guidelines. Thank you for listening to all of that about the study. We at the Circuit Trails Coalition are really proud of that study, and it really, like I said, it's a roadmap for us. And so we just want everyone to understand it and where it came from and what it means to us as much as possible. So, okay, so everything I'm about to say is information that can be found in the program guidelines. I'm not going to say anything that is dramatically new or new at all. I'm just going to try to explain it in a way in case like what I wrote into the guidelines doesn't make any sense. And we'll see if I do a good job of that. So the first one is that the program offers 1 year and 2 year grants. So you can submit an application for 1 year of funding. If you're selected, you'll receive a check in February and you'll implement your project in 2023. Or you can submit an application for 2 years of funding. So you'll submit the application like, you know, before December 22nd, and you'll click off that you want 2 years of funding. If you're selected, you would receive a check in February to implement a project in 2023, and then you would receive another check in February of 2024 to implement your project in 2024. So our hope is that a 2 year grant program offers grantees some breathing room to develop a project or a program, run it this year, learn lessons and adjust, and know that you're funded to do it again in 2024, to like make tweaks or scrap some things altogether and try something different for the second year. But we also recognize that a 1 year grant might be a better fit for a grantee who doesn't want to make that level of commitment or just knows exactly what they need to do. It's going to be this one thing. It's just going to be for, you know, this year, and then you're done. So you have options for either 1 or 2 years. And I hope that didn't further confuse anyone. The application will ask you if you're requesting 1 or 2. So you'll be able to like click that off. It's a checkbox on the online application. You can request $1,000 to $10,000 per year. So just to get further into it, if your application says that you're applying for a 2 year grant and you're requesting $5,000 for your project, if your project is selected, you would receive $5,000 this February to implement your project in 2023. And then you would receive another $5,000 in February 2024 to implement your project in 2024. So the number you put into the application this year is just for like this first year, and then you would receive it again for the second year. Altogether, the program has $150,000 to disperse over 2 years. And because this is a program that is generously funded by the William Penn Foundation, there are no stipulations about what the funding can or cannot be used for. It's unrestricted funding. Your application will ask you for a budget description, which is where you'll explain what you plan to do with the funds. And we all work in nonprofit we in the nonprofit sector, we understand that running projects and programs takes your time, which costs money. It takes volunteer incentives. It requires rent and utilities and food at meetings and program supplies and travel expenses. So put that all into your budget. Be honest, be like about what it's really going to cost you, because we get it. And we hope that that's helpful to have unrestricted funds. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so who's eligible? Individuals, groups, and organizations are all eligible. You don't need a 501c3 designation or a fiscal sponsor to apply. And I should say that if you are a small nonprofit and you actually want to go in with if a larger nonprofit is going to apply on your behalf, you're partnering, that's totally fine too. This doesn't mean that you have to be a scrappy nonprofit or a small one to apply. Everyone is welcome to apply, is what I need to say. Your project does need to be in the geography of the Circuit Trails network. That includes Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware, and Philadelphia counties in Pennsylvania, Mercer, Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester counties in New Jersey. And then finally, your project needs to relate to a circuit trail. It doesn't need to be on a trail. It can be in the neighborhood of a trail. It just needs to relate to a circuit trail. Now, the grant program will prioritize a few things. One is organizations or projects led by and engaging underrepresented and marginalized groups. This includes, but is not limited to, Black, Indigenous, and/or people of color, Asian American and Pacific Islanders, disabled people or people with disabilities, immigrants, people who earn a low income, and queer and trans people. We're also going to prioritize projects that serve a geographic area or neighborhood that historically has been subject to systemic racism and disinvestment, with a higher than average concentration of low-income residents who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or ethnic minorities. I'm going to get a little bit more into that when we look at the evaluation of applications. And then finally, organizations with an annual budget of less than $500,000. If none of these describe you, your organization, or your project, that is still, again, totally okay. You're still eligible. This is just a list of projects that the program is going to prioritize when we're looking at all the applications. So at this point, Danielle's going to post a link directly to the grant guidelines and application. I think you all will have received it via email, so you've probably seen it before, but you'll have it now right at your fingertips. So we also have a few different versions. I should say we have a version of the guidelines and application as a Google Doc that Danielle will post, and as a PDF that will also provide. And hopefully those are just helpful as you're working on the application. You can work on it in a Google Doc and then drop the answers into the online platform. And if they don't help, then just ignore them. So PEC uses an online platform called Submittable to run our grant programs. So when you first try to access Submittable, when you first go online to check out the guidelines, you'll need to create an account the first time you visit. We are accepting applications that are written or that are videos. So there'll be no preference given to whichever you select, whether you do written application online or if you submit a video. We're simply offering an option in case one is easier for you or just more your style than the other. If you do choose to apply by video, the online application will offer an opportunity. There's a clear spot where you can upload your video file. Now, every question on the application is still going to be required. So if you do answer the questions in the video, just put see video in the required fields where you answered the question in your video. It should be also no more than 10 minutes. And I hope that was clear. For the written application, there are character limits, 1,500 for the questions that are about you and your project, and then 1,000 character limit for just the budget description. If you notice a field that does not list a character limit, it's a short answer. It's the name of your organization. It's not a sort of longer paragraphs of response. One thing to note is that it's possible to save or to do parts of your application and then exit the program, come back before you submit. So make sure you save as you go so you just don't lose any work. And then you will get a confirmation email once your application has been submitted. So getting into the application evaluation. So what is the review group going to be looking at when we look at your applications. You'll see that the application is not very long. We tried to keep it pretty brief. I want to give credit, I need to give credit to Justice Outside and the Liberated Paths grant making program, which provided a model for such a concise and succinct application. So here's what the advisory group is going to be looking at when we review the applications in January. So one is community. So we want to see that the applicant has identified a particular community or communities with which they engage, and they know what those communities need. We want to see a relationship, that the applicant or the group or the organization's leadership has a meaningful relationship with the communities they engage or that this project intends to engage. And then we want to see that the project idea is relevant to the needs of the neighborhood, it's feasible, and that it will help to achieve the goals or the objectives of the grant program, which I just outlined, the equity of access to trails recommendations. And then we want to see that the project will be implemented in a geographic area with a higher than average IPD score. That stands for Indicators of Potential Disadvantage. It's a tool that DVRPC, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, uses to assess equity for their projects and plans. So Daniel has a link that will also lead you to learn more about this Indicators of Potential Disadvantage or IPD score. So all you need to know for this one is that the way we're going to evaluate where the project is located is by the zip code that you put into the project. So when we are reviewing all of them, we're going to drop the zip code into the DVRPC map, and we'll be able to see where it is and look at some of the context of their IPD score, if that makes sense. So we want to see that the project will be implemented, of course, on or near a circuit trail. Or that it's related to a specific trail or like trail sites. And we definitely want to see that the project will meaningfully help to realize the equity of access to trails recommendations. We want to see that the project will clearly create a change in the community. Now note, the change does not need to be transformational. We recognize that you can't radically alter a neighborhood with $5,000 or even $10,000. But we just want to see that there is some impact of the project or program. And then lastly, we just want to see that the cost and proposed budget are appropriate for the project. So that's what we will be looking at when we review the applications in January. And so that gets me to dates. So the big date to know is Thursday, December 22nd at 11:59 p.m. That's the deadline to submit online. All applications are due then. Before that, though, the advisory group is hosting totally optional, one-on-one 30-minute conversations with any applicant who chooses to do so. So this is before you submit your application. If you want to meet with us on Zoom or by phone to just talk through your project idea, ask any questions you have about it, then you will be able to do so. We're hosting on November 28th and 29th, and then December 1st, 5th, 6th, and 7th. Daniel's going to drop a link to sign up for one of the time slots via Calendly. And again, this is totally optional. It won't have any bearing on your application. If you, for some reason, just can't or don't want to join, that is totally okay. We're going to try our best to have applicants meet with someone who does not end up reviewing their application, so that we're going to try to keep it nice and neat that way. And then looking ahead, the advisory group is going to review applications in January. We will select grantees in February, and that's when PEC would handle the contracting and then issuing checks. And then the grantees will begin implementing projects in March. And you don't have to begin in March, you could begin in June if that's what works for your project or program. But March is just going to be like the sort of kickoff. And then for the rest of the year, people will be implementing projects. So I want to be very, very clear that we are here to help. As I said earlier, this is our first year running this program. And even though it seems like it's really prescribed or prescriptive might be the word, because of this equity of access to trails, the clear recommendations that we're trying to bring to life, we also welcome your creativity and your ideas and your knowledge about your neighborhood and what you want to do. So yeah, reach out to us if you want to talk, if you have questions. My contact information is there. If you have any questions about the content of the program, reach out to me. If you are having an issue with submittable, with like creating an account or figuring out your password, then reach out to support@submittable.com. They're available Monday through Friday, 11 to 7. And generally, you can just find a lot more information on the circuit trails as well on circuittrails.org. And particularly like the resources tab has tons of info. So, and speaking of which, here are the resources that Daniel provided you today. This is really largely for the PDF that you're going to get later. And that brings us at 2:37, brings us to the questions. Oh, sorry, more resources, tons of resources. And that brings us to questions. So I flew through that. There's a lot. I hope there are some questions that we can get into for the next like 15 odd minutes. Daniel, do you have any that you want to lift up here?
Yeah, there was one specifically about the amounts that
Okay.
I thought others might have. The question was, is $10,000 the total maximum amount, or could a 2-year project request 10,000 per year? So in
Yep.
other words, 20 total.
Exactly. It's per year. So the maximum is per year. So you could apply for, so you would get 10,000 1 year and 10,000 the second year if you were selected and you said that your request was 10,000. I understand that this is confusing. But it's the question on the application, it should say, what is your request per year? So yeah, you would get a total of 20,000 over the 2 years. I hope that answers your question. And yeah. So to answer a question about the budget. So I see one that says our budget is $500,000. Should we not apply? You should apply. If your budget is over 500,000, that's totally fine. Please apply. And then that's why I tried to make it clear that we will prioritize the smaller nonprofits, the individuals and organizations and groups who typically have a harder time accessing funds because they often have limited capacity. And so that's why we're trying to direct money that way. But yeah, apply please so that we can consider your application. So let's see. Who were the stakeholders involved in the study? Now there is a large list that Daniel actually has kept up of stakeholders involved in the study. Daniel, do you have any names that come to mind from the different areas who were any key stakeholders that you want to mention?
Yeah, so the stakeholders for the study, the Equity of Access to Trails study, a lot of those groups were community-based organizations that focused on the outdoors, programming trails, also parks. Some were also arts and youth or community development groups. So some didn't necessarily have to do specifically with trails itself. So say in Cobbs Creek, that we worked with the Southwest CDC, the Cobbs Creek Community Environmental Center, the Rec Center as well. There is a group called We Walk PHL, a walking group. So groups kind of like that, generally towards the outdoors and environmental education or engagement, but not necessarily have to be tied into that. So hopefully that answers. But I believe a lot of the stakeholders are listed in those studies, but if not, feel free to reach out to Amelia, or I can also put my email in the chat about the study itself if you have more questions.
So I also see a question, is advocacy something that can be funded or part of a grant funded project? Advocacy absolutely can be funded. And I encourage you to apply if you have a project in mind. Organizing people as part of advocacy could be funded. We don't necessarily, doesn't necessarily have to be something that's like, as I said earlier, concrete. It doesn't have to be benches and umbrellas. Yeah, and we recognize that sometimes getting something like amenities might take the organizing and advocacy that is building the foundation for those changes. So we welcome those applications as well. And that actually, that work can increase awareness of the trails as well. So that could address that issue of, 2/3 of people not knowing that there's a trail in their neighborhood. So potentially that advocacy work and the organizing could achieve that objective, if you're curious about like how you would hit one of those kind of targets. Let's see. Oh, is this only for nonprofit organizations? No, this is for individuals, groups, nonprofits. You know, to be quite honest, the advisory group hadn't considered that others, like for-profit businesses or something, might apply. But right now, I think we are in curious mode. We're like curious to see who has an idea for something to fund, and I think we'll see what comes through. I hope that helps to answer that question. Let's see. If you are, I see a question from Eleanor. If you are funded in 2023, are you automatically funded in 2024? So if you choose a 2-year grant, if you choose to go for a 2-year funding, the idea is that the funding will be held back for you to run your program in. First, you'll get provided the funding in 2023, but that once you run your initial program, we will meet with you and see how it went and see what you need to tweak or change or lessons you learned to then run the program or project in 2024. I hesitate to say automatically funded. If not that anyone would do this, but you know, if you take your funds to Atlantic City, aren't necessarily gonna give you more funds in 2024. But we see this as a partnership where we want to work with you to make sure that you know, whatever you ran in 2023, if you need to make any changes or learn from it, we all learn together, and that you are best set up to then get your funding again in February 2024 and run your program again a second time. So not completely guaranteed, but like we're going to keep the funds so that it's available to you, and not disperse it, you know, to anyone else. Let's see. Now I see lots of questions coming in. Okay. If your project, okay, this is an interesting one. So if your project budget is larger than what you're asking for from the specific grant, so let's say your whole project is going to cost you $50,000, but you're asking for you know, 10 each year from this program. Are there certain budget line items that you would prefer to fund? No. We do want to see your whole budget, and then you know, I don't think that we even need to know what exactly it is that this grant would cover. But I think it will be important for us to know, and there is a question like, you know, are you going to require additional funding to do your entire project if it costs more than this grant program offers? So that's in that budget description, and offers the opportunity to explain that a little bit more of like, you know what, our whole project is going to cost $50,000, and here's where we're going to get that from, and here's what the entire project is going to cost, like why it's $50,000. I don't think you need to tell us, you know, that like this fund, the community grant program, is going to cover volunteer incentives and marketing. It doesn't need to get that detailed. Does applying under a bigger nonprofit, would that affect our application? I think not. I think that I think you would, in one of the fields, you can make it clear that you are applying, that you are a smaller nonprofit, maybe aligned with a larger nonprofit who is applying on your behalf. I guess with a lot of these questions, the answer is to explain in the application sort of what the scenario is, and that we can, so that we get a full understanding when we're reviewing it of what exactly it is that we're considering. And if you, I would say err on the side of providing that information, because again, we're going to be reading lots of different applications and we won't know that context. So if you can provide the context, it will help us to better understand where you're coming from in your application. Ooh, Richard Barron has a good question. So Richard asks, are there models for this kind of inclusive programming that any of the reports highlight? So one of the links that Daniel dropped to, I think it was the community grant program purpose and objectives. The end of that, it's a Google document. The end of that document offers some project ideas or models from around the area, and I think maybe around the country. I want to say thank you to Anya Saretsky from Rails to Trails Conservancy for putting that together. So there are those examples. Are there other places, Daniel, that might offer those models?
Yes, we do have some of those in the documents from the report, and I can share out. I think actually some of those are you used in the slides,
Okay.
but there are lots of examples. Rails to Trails Conservancy and Circuit Trails generally, they have a number of blog posts too, that if you check back through the blog, a lot of those posts are highlighting events that have gone on that have basically been really great examples of programming that engages communities. So again, feel free to reach out to us directly if you want even more examples, because we've got a lot.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, so I see technical help. So there's a question about submittable. Should folks copy us, us being like the advisory group or PEC, if there's an issue, so we know that they're having problems? You know what? If you have an issue with submittable, please reach out to submittable. If you don't hear from them in a day or two, I've been told that they're very responsive, but then reach out to me and let me know what's going on, and we'll work with you. I don't want that to delay your like cause you any stress that's completely unnecessary. So yeah, reach out to us if you don't hear from them in a couple of days. And I don't think that slide had a phone number. So I see another question. I appreciate the ability to apply using video. Will your final reporting also offer this option? And yes, the advisory group has talked about this. And thank you for asking about the final reporting. It's this, I didn't include it in the slide presentation because, to be completely honest, we haven't landed on exactly what it is that the reporting will entail. But we definitely, I should say, we want to see what it is that you all get up to, and that's gonna, like, you'll learn that best through video and through like actually us visiting the projects and the sites through conversation. We've talked a lot about how conversation often elicits a lot more interesting like anecdotes, and just you can learn a lot more than just a written response to a question. So we will see how it goes with the application videos, and then hopefully we will also be able to accept videos for the reporting. And then the last question I left to the last because I honestly don't know how to answer it. Can municipalities apply? We had not considered that a municipality might apply, and I'm not sure. I only hesitate because I'm not sure about the William Penn Foundation funding, and if there are any restrictions around it going into a to a municipality or county or a public office. I might have to get back to you on that one, Melissa.
Yeah, I was going to say follow up.
Yeah,
is in order.
and I will. And if other people do happen to have that question, I will update the guidelines to include that information as soon as I have an actual answer for you. So those are all the questions that I see. Oh, can you email? Another one just came through, which is why I got excited. So can you email the list of links? Sure. So we actually have it in a Google document that I sent to Daniel. So perhaps we could just make that available, and I can include that. So what you'll get after this webinar is a copy of the recording, a link to the recording of the video. You'll get a PDF of the slides. Those slides have the different resource links in them, but also we can include that Google document in case that's easier for you to open, which has the links to all the different resources as well. And I hope that helps. Let's see. So Daniel is still dropping some links. I see no other questions. If there are no other questions, then I think we have wrapped things up in under an hour. I want to say again, a huge thank you for being here, for taking the time to learn more about this grant program, for being with us in this process of doing something for the first time. Again, thank you for your patience and your grace. We appreciate it in advance. And we are here to help. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to think through things with you. So please reach out and use that Canva, or not Canva, Calendly link to sign up for some one-on-one sessions to talk with us about your projects. We honestly are so excited to see what you all have in mind, and look forward to reading your applications. So thank you all very much for being here. And we have ended early. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna say farewell to everyone.
Thanks,
Oh,
everyone.
wait, but I see a question coming in.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Okay, I got nervous that there were lots of questions coming in. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Can't wait to read your applications.